Have you ever wondered if the birthday that adds another candle can also quietly put your driver's license on trial? Because for thousands of Canadian seniors, the real danger is not reckless driving. It is waking up one day and realizing the rules changed before anyone clearly told you. If you want simple facts that protect your freedom, tap like, subscribe, and share this with one person in your family who still thinks the old driving rules never change. There is a kind of fear many older drivers never say out loud. It is not the fear of the road. It is not even the fear of a traffic ticket. It is the fear of losing the keys, losing the car, and losing the quiet dignity of being able to go where you need to go without asking for help. And that fear is exactly why this topic matters so much. Because in Canada, the rules around senior driving do change. They do get tighter with age. They do involve health, eyesight, screening, deadlines, and paperwork. But here's the part most people miss. The system is usually not trying to punish safe older drivers. The system is trying to spot risk before a tragedy happens. And when people get caught out, it is often not because they became dangerous overnight. It is because they did not understand the process early enough to stay ahead of it. That is what this video is for. I am going to walk you through 5 driving rules that matter for Canadian seniors in 2026. I will explain what they really mean in plain English and show you how to protect your license, your insurance, and your independence. And yes, number 4 is the one that shocks the most people because it reaches into doctor visits, medication changes, and even conversations you thought had nothing to do with driving. Before we get into the 5 rules, there is one thing you absolutely must understand. Canada does not have one single national senior driving rule that hits everybody the same way. Driver licensing is provincial. That means Ontario has its own process. British Columbia has its own process. Alberta has its own process. Quebec has its own process. The names of the forms change. The ages can change. The steps can change. But the overall pattern is the same across the country. As drivers move into their later years, the license stops being something that quietly renews in the background and becomes something that must be actively protected. That matters in 2026 because online fear content is everywhere. One post says seniors must all retest at 70. Another says Canada is taking away licenses at 80. Another says a secret federal law is coming. Much of that is exaggerated, recycled, or flat out false. The real rules are serious enough on their own. You do not need fake ones piled on top. So do not think of this as a scare video. Think of it as a map. Rule number 1 is this. Your renewal cycle can change faster than you expect. And the age that matters may be closer than you think. For many people, a license renewal is just background noise. You pay a fee, update a photo, maybe glance at an expiry date and move on. That rhythm creates a dangerous habit. It makes you believe the next renewal will feel like the last one. But for senior drivers, that assumption can break. In Ontario, drivers aged 80 and over must renew every 2 years, not every 5. And that renewal is not just a payment. It includes a vision assessment and a short screening exercise. In British Columbia, drivers still renew a standard license on the usual cycle, but age 80 brings an added medical fitness requirement. Then another at 85 and every 2 years after that. In Alberta, the health review starts even earlier for many regular drivers, with medical reports required at 75, then 80, then every 2 years after 80. Now stop and think about what that means in real life. A person who has driven safely for 50 or 60 years can still be blindsided, not because they became a bad driver, but because the calendar quietly moved them into a different category. The license they always thought of as stable becomes conditional. Not gone, not doomed, but conditional. And here's the first trap. The government may send notices, but the responsibility still lands on you. If your address is outdated, if you ignore a letter, if you put the appointment off, if you say, I will deal with it next month. You can slide from active license to expired or medically incomplete without meaning to. That sounds small until you picture the moment it turns serious. You drive to the grocery store. You get pulled over for something minor, maybe a brake light, maybe a routine stop. Then you discover your license is not valid because a form was missed, a report was late, or a renewal step was never finished. Suddenly, this is no longer an errand. It is a legal problem. That is why the first smart move is so simple and so powerful. Find your province's rule before your birthday forces you to. Not after the letter arrives, before. If you're in Alberta and approaching 75, pay attention now. If you're in Ontario and nearing 80, pay attention now. If you are in British Columbia and approaching 80, pay attention now. The earlier you know your milestone age, the calmer everything becomes. And that leads straight to rule number 2, because once renewal changes, the next fear usually follows immediately. The test. This is the word that makes many older drivers tense up. The minute they hear screening, they imagine humiliation. They imagine a stranger trying to trick them. They imagine one shaky moment erasing a lifetime of safe driving. But fear grows fastest in confusion, so let's replace confusion with detail. In Ontario, the senior renewal process for drivers 80 and over includes a vision assessment and a brief screening exercise. The screening exercise is not some giant written exam. It is short. One well-known part is the clock drawing task. You are asked to draw a circle, place the numbers like a clock face, and set the hands to a specific time. The goal is not to embarrass you. It is to look for warning signs in how the brain organizes information. That is an important difference. The system is not asking, how old are you? It is asking, are there signs that driving ability should be looked at more closely? Those are not the same question. And if you hear one thing from me in this section, let it be this. A screening exercise is not the same thing as automatic failure. Many healthy seniors go through it, complete it, and move on. No road test, no drama, no license seizure, just a routine part of staying current. In Ontario, there is also educational material built into the renewal process. Drivers are told to review the driver's handbook and watch the senior driver education video before the appointment. That matters more than people think. Not because it is hard, but because road rules do change. New intersections, new signage, new right-of-way habits, new distraction risks. People who have driven for decades often underestimate how much the road itself has changed around them. Let me make this real. Imagine a man named David. He is 81. He still drives to see his daughter every Sunday, picks up prescriptions on his own, and has never had a serious crash. Then the renewal notice comes, and suddenly he feels insulted. He hears the word screening and thinks, after 60 years of driving, now they want to test me like a teenager? So he postpones. He complains. He lets the letter sit on the kitchen table. Now imagine another man, same age, same driving history. He feels the same annoyance, but instead of freezing, he prepares. He checks the handbook. He books the appointment. He brings his glasses. He shows up calm. 10 days later, the whole thing is over. Same system, same age, completely different experience. That is the deeper lesson here. Stress often comes less from the rule itself than from the story we tell ourselves about the rule. The same principle applies to eyesight, which is really the quiet center of this whole process. Most vision decline does not arrive like a thunderclap. It arrives like dusk, so slowly that the person living through it may not notice how much has changed. Night glare gets worse. Left turns feel a little less comfortable. Rain becomes more tiring. Highway signs seem sharp enough in daylight, but not quite as easy after dark. None of that feels dramatic in the moment, but together, those small changes can affect safety more than people admit. That is why vision is such a major part of senior license reviews. In Ontario, if you bring a recent vision report from your eye doctor with the required results, you may not need to do the on-site vision screening. That is one of the best practical steps any senior driver can take. Book the eye exam before the renewal. Update the prescription if needed. Walk in knowing where you stand. Because the worst place to discover a vision problem is not in the comfort of your optometrist's office. It is in the middle of a renewal appointment when the next steps suddenly become uncertain. And let's be honest about something else. Many people do not fear the eye test because of the letters on a chart. They fear what a failed result seems to mean about the future. They are not thinking, can I read the line? They are thinking, if I cannot read the line, what happens to my life? That emotional weight is real. But the way to fight it is not denial. It is early information. If you are still driving, and especially if you are over 70, your eyes are not something to hope about. They are something to check on purpose. And here is where the whole conversation starts getting deeper, because once driving rules touch your health, they no longer live only at the licensing office. They follow you into clinics, pharmacies, medical charts, and sometimes into very ordinary appointments that feel like they have nothing to do with your car. That is exactly why rule number 3 matters so much. Your health does not stay private from your driving status. In Ontario, physicians, nurse practitioners, and optometrists have mandatory reporting duties for certain conditions that make driving dangerous. They also have authority to report other concerns when they believe a person may not be safe behind the wheel. In British Columbia, older drivers face medical fitness reviews through forms completed by a doctor or nurse practitioner. In Alberta, drivers are required to self-report any disease or disability that may interfere with safe driving. Now pause there, because this is where many viewers feel a wave of disbelief. They think, you mean I can go to the doctor for a health issue and that can affect my license? Yes, it can. And not only for the dramatic conditions people usually imagine. Of course, major things matter: seizures, fainting episodes, dementia, serious vision loss, certain heart problems, severe sleep apnea, major neurological conditions. But the issue can also begin in quieter ways: a dizzy spell, a medication change, a sudden drop in alertness, a pattern of confusion, a condition that is manageable most days but unpredictable on the wrong day. If this video is helping you think ahead instead of react late, subscribe now. and send it to one parent, neighbor, or friend before their next renewal letter turns into a panic. What makes this so difficult emotionally is not just the rule, it is the feeling of betrayal people can attach to it. Someone says, my own doctor reported me. But that sentence hides the reality. The doctor may not be attacking your freedom. The doctor may be following the law or responding to a safety concern that would be irresponsible to ignore. That does not make it painless, it just makes it real. And this is where families often make a bad situation worse. Instead of dealing with the facts, they turn the issue into a moral battle. The senior feels judged. The adult children feel frightened. Everyone avoids direct language. Nobody asks the clean question. Am I still safe to drive under these conditions? That question matters more than pride, more than embarrassment, more than habit. Because the road does not care about our self-image. The road only cares what happens when a body, a brain, a pair of eyes, and a 2-ton machine meet a fast-moving world. Let me give you a picture. A woman named Helen is 77. She is sharp, active, and proud of doing everything for herself. She starts a new medication to help her sleep after a difficult year. No one around her thinks of it as a driving issue. She's not reckless. She's not confused. She just feels a little slower in the morning than she used to. Then one day she drifts slightly at an intersection. Nothing terrible happens. But it scares her. She tells herself she was tired. A week later, the same thing happens again. This is the moment that decides the future. If Helen hides it, keeps driving, and hopes it passes, the risk grows. If Helen asks the pharmacist and her doctor, could this affect my driving? She's doing something wise, not weak. And that question is powerful because it turns a hidden danger into a manageable one. Maybe the medication changes. Maybe the timing changes. Maybe the answer is to avoid early driving for a while. Maybe there is no issue at all. But now the risk is being handled in daylight instead of secrecy. That is how older drivers protect independence the right way. Not by pretending nothing has changed, but by staying honest enough to adapt before the system has to force the issue. Which brings us to rule number 4, the one most seniors over 70 do miss, and the one that causes the deepest shock. A medical report or health concern can trigger a license review or suspension faster than people expect. And the process may begin before you feel ready. This is the silent rule. It does not arrive with the drama of a police stop. It does not feel like a traffic law. It can begin with paperwork, a report, a doctor's note, a specialist visit, or a request for more information. But once it begins, it can move into the center of your life very quickly. In Ontario, once a report is received, the ministry reviews the case against medical standards. If the information shows the driver does not meet those standards, the license can be suspended, and the driver is told what information is needed for possible reinstatement. In Alberta, the review process can lead to more medical information, functional assessments, or even a road test. In British Columbia, if a required medical report does not arrive on time, the license may be cancelled until it does. Read that again in emotional terms, not legal terms. A missed report, a delayed form, an unclear diagnosis, a doctor's concern. Any one of these can put your driving on hold. And that is why so many people say number 4 came out of nowhere. It rarely felt like a driving problem at the beginning. Maybe it started with memory slips that seemed normal. Maybe it started with an eye condition. Maybe it started with blackouts, chest symptoms, weakness, or medication side effects. The health issue felt separate from the license right up until the moment the two collided. Now, there are 2 bad reactions here, and both can ruin lives. Maybe it started with blackouts, chest symptoms, weakness, or medication side effects. The health issue felt separate from the license right up until the moment the two collided. Now, there are 2 bad reactions here, and both can ruin lives. The first is panic. Panic says, it's over. My freedom is gone. There's no point fighting this. The second is denial. Denial says, this is ridiculous. I'm driving anyway. Both reactions can be disastrous, because for many people, a medical review is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a process that may involve new medical information, better documentation, a specialist opinion, a functional assessment, or a formal reconsideration. Denial says, this is ridiculous. I'm driving anyway. Both reactions can be disastrous, because for many people, a medical review is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a process that may involve new medical information, better documentation, a specialist opinion, a functional assessment, or a formal reconsideration. Some people keep their full privileges. Some people keep their full privileges. Some continue driving with conditions. Some are asked to prove safety more clearly. And yes, some do lose the right to drive. But the outcome is not always instant and final in the way fear tells us it is. This is the section where your mindset matters most. If you're ever caught in this process, your job is not to collapse. Your job is to respond. Read every letter, meet every deadline, ask exactly what is required, get the forms completed properly, follow up, meet every deadline, Ask exactly what is required. Get the forms completed properly. Follow up. Keep copies. If there is an assessment, show up prepared. If there is a misunderstanding, correct it with evidence, not anger. There's a huge difference between being medically reviewed and being helpless. And let me say something many people need to hear. Driving with a suspended license because you feel the decision was unfair does not protect your independence. It destroys your position. It turns a disputed medical issue into a clear legal violation. That is where rule number 5 enters, and it may be the harshest one of all. If your license is expired, suspended, or not properly renewed, one ordinary drive can become an insurance nightmare. This is the part almost nobody talks about enough. People understand fines. They understand tickets. They understand getting in trouble with police. One ordinary drive can become an insurance nightmare. This is the part almost nobody talks about enough. People understand fines. They understand tickets. They understand getting in trouble with police. But they do not always connect the dots between license status and insurance exposure. Yet the connection is everything. If you are driving when you're not legally licensed to drive, your insurance protection may be at serious risk. And if a collision happens in that window, what looked like a small paperwork issue can turn into financial disaster. Think about how brutal that is. And if a collision happens in that window, what looked like a small paperwork issue can turn into financial disaster. Think about how brutal that is. Not a reckless race, not drunk driving, not some wild act. Just a person who thought, I'm only going to the bank, or I just need milk, while not realizing a renewal condition had failed, a medical report had not been filed, or a suspension had already taken effect. In that moment, the car is no longer just transportation. It becomes a liability machine. And that is why the final rule is not really about punishment. A medical report had not been filed, or a suspension had already taken effect. In that moment, the car is no longer just transportation. It becomes a liability machine. And that is why the final rule is not really about punishment. It is about consequences. The system is telling you something simple. If you want the freedom of the road, you must protect the legal foundation underneath that freedom. The forms matter, the reports matter, the eye exams matter, the letters matter, the deadlines matter. They are not annoying extras around your independence. They are the structure holding your independence up. Now let's step back from the rules themselves and look at the deeper conflict underneath all 5. For many seniors, driving is not just driving, it is identity. It is proof that you are still capable, still useful, still not dependent, still yourself. That is why these rules hit so hard. They do not feel like administrative updates. They feel personal. They feel like someone is measuring your worth through your car keys. But here's the truth that can save people a lot of pain. They do not feel like administrative updates. They feel personal. They feel like someone is measuring your worth through your car keys. But here is the truth that can save people a lot of pain. Safe driving in later life is not about proving you're unchanged. It is about proving you are responsible enough to notice what has changed and respond well. That is real maturity, not stubbornness, not pretending, not fighting reality with pride. Safe driving in later life is not about proving you are unchanged. It is about proving you are responsible enough to notice what has changed and respond well. That is real maturity, not stubbornness, not pretending, not fighting reality with pride. Responsibility. A responsible older driver updates the glasses prescription. A responsible older driver asks about medication side effects. A responsible older driver does not ignore dizziness. A responsible older driver does not hide a fainting spell to protect the ego. A responsible older driver knows that the goal is not to drive forever at any cost. The goal is to drive safely for as long as it is truly safe. And when you see it that way, the whole emotional frame changes. A responsible older driver knows that the goal is not to drive forever at any cost. The goal is to drive safely for as long as it is truly safe. And when you see it that way, the whole emotional frame changes. The renewal is no longer an insult. It becomes maintenance. The medical form is no longer an attack. It becomes evidence. The screening is no longer a trap. It becomes a checkpoint. The eye exam is no longer bad news waiting to happen. It becomes one of the tools that helps you stay on the road with confidence. If you believe more families need this conversation before a crisis forces it, hit like, subscribe, and share this video today. One honest talk now can prevent a terrible argument later. There is another hard truth here, and I want to say it carefully. For some viewers, the day will come when the safest choice is to drive less, or drive under certain limits, or stop driving entirely. That is not what most of you want to hear. I know that. But I would rather give you a painful truth than a comforting lie. Because the people most at risk are not always the ones who already know they should stop. Very often, they are the ones who tie driving so tightly to dignity that they cannot imagine life without it, so they keep going past the point of safety. That is how preventable tragedies happen, and yet, even here, there is something hopeful. Losing the ability to drive safely is not the same thing as losing the ability to live meaningfully. It feels that way at first, especially in areas with poor transit, long distances, or harsh winters, but it is still not the same thing. There are community rides, senior transit supports, family schedules, volunteer driver programs, delivery services, ride apps that relatives can help set up, free identification cards in some provinces when a driver retires from driving. None of these feels emotionally equal to having your own car in your own driveway. Let's be honest about that. There are community rides, senior transit supports, family schedules, volunteer driver programs, delivery services, ride apps that relatives can help set up, free identification cards in some provinces when a driver retires from driving. None of these feels emotionally equal to having your own car in your own driveway. Let's be honest about that. But they are often far better than people imagine when fear is doing all the talking. Sometimes the suffering comes less from the practical problem and more from the story attached to it. The story says, if I lose the license, I lose myself. But that story is too cruel, and it is not true. A license is a privilege and a tool. It is not your soul. Your wisdom is not in the ignition. Your value is not hanging from a key ring. And the reason I say that in a video about keeping your license is because, strange as it sounds, accepting that truth can actually make you a stronger driver today. The less desperate you are to deny every change, the more honestly you can manage the real ones. And the reason I say that in a video about keeping your license is because, strange as it sounds, accepting that truth can actually make you a stronger driver today. The less desperate you are to deny every change, the more honestly you can manage the real ones. The more honestly you manage the real ones, the longer you're likely to stay safe, legal, and confident on the road. So let me bring everything together into the 5 moves that matter most. First, Eloise, earn your province's milestone age and renewal pattern before it sneaks up on you. In Ontario, 80 matters. In British Columbia, 80. The more honestly you manage the real ones, the longer you are likely to stay safe, legal, and confident on the road. So let me bring everything together into the 5 moves that matter most. First, earn your province's milestone age and renewal pattern before it sneaks up on you. In Ontario, 80 matters. In British Columbia, 80 matters. In Alberta, 75 matters sooner than many people expect. Do not rely on rumors. Check the official rule for where you live. Second, treat your eyes like part of your license, because they are. Okay the exam early. Bring the right glasses. Get the report if your province allows it. Do not wait to be surprised. Third, do not let the word screening scare you into avoidance. A short cognitive or vision-related process is not a public shaming. It is a checkpoint, and thousands of seniors pass through these steps without losing the right to drive. Okay, the exam early. Bring the right glasses. Get the report if your province allows it. Do not wait to be surprised. Third, do not let the word screening scare you into avoidance. A short cognitive or vision-related process is not a public shaming. It is a checkpoint, and thousands of seniors pass through these steps without losing the right to drive. Fourth, never separate your health from your driving in your mind. Ask direct questions. Could this condition affect my license? Could this medication affect my driving? Do I need to report this? Does my doctor need to report this? Those questions can save months of confusion. Fifth, protect your legal status like you protect your car. Keep your address current. Open every letter. Meet every deadline. Confirm your renewal is complete. If there's a suspension or review, stop driving until it is resolved. One careless trip is not worth the insurance risk, the legal damage, or the danger. Independence is not protected by ignorance. It is protected by preparation. That is the heart of this whole video. Not fear. Preparation, not panic. Preparation, not pretending you're 30 years younger than you are. Preparation. The seniors who protect their freedom longest are very often not the ones who shout the loudest about their rights. They are the ones who quietly stay ahead of the system. They know their dates, they know their health, they know their province adest process. They ask the awkward question before the awkward letter arrives. They deal with reality while reality is still manageable. If that is the kind of driver you want to be, then start this week. Check your renewal age, book the eye exam, review your medications, update your address, talk to your doctor if anything has changed. And if someone you love is over 70 and still driving, do not wait until there is a scare to send them this. Because the real threat in 2026 is not that Canada has suddenly declared war on senior drivers. The real threat is the dangerous gap between what people think the rules are and what the rules actually are. Close that gap, and most of this gets less frightening. Ignore that gap, and even a good driver can get blindsided. So no, this is not the end of the road for Canadian seniors. For many of you, it is simply the moment to drive smarter, prep earlier, and protect your license with the same care you use to protect everything else that matters. Because your independence is precious, and precious things are not defended by wishful thinking. They're defended by attention, honesty, and action. That is how you keep the keys on your terms for as long as those terms are truly safe. And if the day ever comes when the keys have to change hands, let it happen with wisdom, not denial. Let it happen before harm, not after it. Let it happen with the same good judgment that carried you through decades of driving in the first place. That is not weakness, that is strength with its ego removed. And in the end, that may be the most powerful rule of all.